Imagine this. You're standing on a train platform in Birmingham, or maybe Leeds or the outskirts of London. It's raining, obviously, and your train was supposed to be here 20 minutes ago. When you check your phone, the ticket price has gone up by 5% since last year, but the service has somehow gotten worse. You're tired. You've been working harder than ever. Yet, your bank account looks exactly the same as it did in 2008. In fact, adjusted for inflation, you're actually poorer. You look around at the crumbling infrastructure, the high streets filled with vape shops and betting terminals, and you have this nagging, sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach that the ride is over, that the country isn't just going through a rough patch, but that something is fundamentally structurally broken. Welcome to the United Kingdom. Once the workshop of the world, the ruler of the waves, the empire on which the sun never set. Today, it's the sick man of Europe. Again, we are looking at an economy that has effectively stopped growing for 15 years. We are looking at a housing market that operates like a pyramid scheme, a healthcare system on life support, and a political class that seems to have spent the last decade playing musical chairs while the Titanic sinks. But why? How did an economic superpower turn into a cautionary tale? Is it Brexit? Is it laziness? Or is it something much darker and much deeply rooted in the very soil of the British class system? Buckle up, grab a cup of tea. If you can afford the electricity to boil the kettle, we're about to dissect the autopsy of an empire. Number 1. The Productivity Ice Age, while your pay packet is frozen in 2007. You're not imagining it. You really are poorer than you should be. If Britain had kept growing productivity at the pace it managed before the bankers blew everything up in 2008, the typical worker today would be taking home something like £12,000, £15,000 a year more. That's a new car every couple of years, or a proper holiday. Maybe even the deposit on a flat that isn't the size of a prison cell. Instead, we've had the longest productivity flatline in modern history. Here's why, told through two blokes doing more or less the same job. Meet Jürgen in Stuttgart. His factory is full of gleaming robots because German labor laws make humans expensive and hard to sack. One man with a tablet now does what 20 used to do with spanners. Now meet Darren in the West Midlands. His factory still runs on 1980s kit because British bosses can hire and fire people on minimum wage whenever they like. Why spend $2 million on automation when 3 lads on 0-hour contracts will shift the pallets for 20 grand a year? Darren runs around like a blue-arsed fly and still produces a fraction of Jürgen's output. Sane sweat, 1/10 the value. That's the trap we're in. Cheap labor means no one bothers to invest. British firms sit near the bottom of the G7 league table for money spent on machinery, software, R&D, you name it. After 2016, the numbers went from bad to catastrophic. Companies would rather buy back their own shares or park cash offshore than buy a single new machine. And government isn't much better. We spend less on infrastructure than almost any rich country you can name. We're trying to run a cutting-edge economy on railways laid out by Brunel and broadband that loses the will to live when it rains. It's like turning up to a gunfight with a particularly pointy stick. And then there's the city. Ever since the Big Bang in the 80s, we decided making things was for losers. Shuffling money was where the real dosh was. So the brightest maths graduates stopped building bridges and started building derivatives. London became the global capital of high-stakes gambling dressed up as finance. When the music stopped in 2008, we discovered we'd sold off the band's instruments years earlier. We don't know how to make stuff anymore, and we forgot to learn. Number 2. The Great House Heist. How Britain became a giant landlord subsidy scheme if productivity is the slow poison. Housing is the shotgun blast to the face. Britain doesn't have a housing crisis. It has a housing cartel older than most countries. Try to build anything. Flats, offices, a wind farm, a laboratory. And you slam into the 1947 Town and Country Planning Act, a piece of legislation that effectively gave every busybody with a view the power to veto the future. The people who get to sit on planning committees? Overwhelmingly homeowners who bought decades ago for the price of a second-hand Fiesta and now guard their unearned jackpot like dragons. The result? We build fewer homes per year than in the 1950s when the country had craters in it. Average house price to earnings ratio in the 1990s, about 4. Today, 8.5 nationally, 13 plus in big cities. That's not a market. That's a wealth transfer from every young worker to every retired homeowner. 40, sometimes 50% of your salary disappears into someone else's buy-to-let mortgage before you've even bought a pint of milk. That money never starts a business, never gets invested, never trickles anywhere except upwards. And spare me the "we're a small island, we've run out of land" nonsense. The sacred green belt around cities includes abandoned pony paddocks, chemical-soaked arable fields you're not allowed to walk on, and my personal favorite, more golf courses in the southeast than there are hospitals. We literally protect the right of accountants to play 18 holes over the right of nurses to live within an hour of the ward. The knock-on effects are brutal. Companies in Oxford or Bristol can recruit because no one under 40 can afford to live there. Infrastructure projects cost triple what they do in France because compulsory purchase of a single semi-detached house requires a second mortgage for the nation. Young people give up, move back with parents or emigrate, and the tax base shrinks even further. We have built a semi-feudal economy where your life chances depend almost entirely on whether mom and dad got on the ladder before the drawbridge went up. Number 3. The austerity chainsaw massacre, when the cure was worse than the disease. So picture this. You've got flat productivity and a housing market eating the young alive. The rational response would be to borrow at rock-bottom rates and invest like mad in science, skills, transport, energy, everything we're missing. Instead, in 2010 the new government looked at the mess left by the bankers and decided the real problem was nurses and teachers earning too much. What followed was the biggest self-inflicted wound in post-war history. Public investment was slashed to levels not seen since the 1930s. Councils sold off playing fields, libraries closed by the hundred. Sure start centers vanished, roads were left to crumble, university technical colleges were canceled mid-build. The theory was that if government just got out of the way, the private sector would magically rush in. It didn't. Firms looked at the crumbling schools and the 6-hour wait at A&E and thought, yeah, maybe we'll expand in Ireland instead. The bill for that experiment is now due. The NHS is on its knees, social care has collapsed, prisons are falling apart, and local authorities are going bankrupt faster than you can say. Section 114. We saved a few billion in borrowing costs and lost tens of billions in growth we will never get back. We cut off both legs to lose weight, and now we wonder why we can't run. That, in 3 acts, is how the workshop of the world turned into the charity shop of Europe. Low investment, no productivity, unaffordable housing, and a decade of ideological self-harm. The tragedy is that none of this was inevitable. Other countries hit by 2008 recovered. Other countries build homes. Other countries invest in their people. We just chose decade after decade, government after government, not to. The rain is still falling on that platform. The train probably isn't coming. But the bigger question is, are we finally ready to admit the track itself is broken? Or are we going to keep blaming the weather? Imagine it's 2010. The world has just been through the biggest financial meltdown since the 1930s. Britain's books look ugly. The new coalition government walks in and sells the public a simple story. Look, the country's credit card is maxed out. We've been living beyond our means. Time to tighten the belt, just like any normal family would. It's a brilliant soundbite. Everyone nods along in the pub. Makes perfect sense, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. This is the single most destructive economic misunderstanding of the last half-century. Households and governments are not the same thing. When you or I stop spending because we're broke, the economy barely notices. When the government slams on the brakes, it's completely different. It sacks teachers, bins hospital upgrades, halts road building schemes, and freezes the pay of everyone on the public payroll. Those people instantly have less money in their pockets. They stop going to restaurants, cancel the holiday, put off buying a new car. The restaurant lays off staff. The taxi firm earns less. Tax receipts collapse. So the government, facing an even bigger hole, cuts again and again. It's a death spiral dressed up as common sense. From 2010 to 2019, Britain ran one of the harshest fiscal consolidations any developed country has ever inflicted on itself in peacetime. Local authority budgets were slashed by just under 50%. Public sector wages were frozen for years. Police numbers fell by 20,000 officers. Sure Start centers shut. Libraries vanished. Youth clubs disappeared. Potholes became craters. We told ourselves we were living within our means. In reality, we were eating the seed corn. Fast forward to today, and we're shocked that the NHS is on its knees. Waiting lists stand at over 7.5 million. More than 2.8 million working-age adults are now economically inactive because of long-term sickness, many of them desperate to work, but unable to get the operation or the mental health treatment they need. That's not just personal tragedy. It's an economic catastrophe. Every month, those people stay ill. The country loses their taxes, their spending, their energy. We decided to save money on healthcare in the 2010s, and now we repaying for it with a permanently smaller economy in the 2020s and 2030s. Penny wise, trillion-pound foolish. We didn't just skimp on the NHS. We stopped maintaining the country full stop. Schools literally started falling down. Google React Concrete if you want nightmares. Courts closed. Prisons became dangerously overcrowded because there was no money to build new ones. We ran the national infrastructure like a landlord who pockets the rent and never fixes the boiler until one day the whole building is condemned. And then, just to make absolutely sure we stayed stuck in the slow lane, we added Brexit. Let's be grown-ups about this. The numbers are in, and they are brutal. Leaving the European Single Market and Customs Union, the largest borderless free trade zone on Earth, has erected barriers where none existed before. Lorries queue for hours. Exporters fill in forms that didn't used to exist. Small firms that used to sell effortlessly into France or Germany have simply given up. The Office for Budget Responsibility, the independent body that marks the Chancellor's homework, estimates the long-run hit to UK GDP is around 4%. 4% sounds tiny until you realize that's roughly £100 billion a year forever. That's more than the entire school's budget. Gone, evaporated in customs declarations and veterinary certificates. Investment took an even bigger beating. For 5 long years after the referendum, nobody knew what the trading rules would be. Would we stay aligned, crash out, some weird Swiss-style deal? While Westminster argued with itself, global companies looked elsewhere. Dublin, Amsterdam, Frankfurt, Paris, they all picked up financial firms, data centers, and regional HQs that would once have come to London or Manchester without a second thought. We turned ourselves into the unpredictable guy at the poker table that nobody wants to do business with. Brexit didn't create Britain's problems: low productivity, underinvestment, regional inequality were all festering long before 2016, but it poured concrete into the cracks. It took an economy that was already limping and broke its other leg. And now we arrive at the part politicians whisper about in corridors because it terrifies them: demographics. The UK is aging at warp speed. By the early 2040s, almost 1 in 4 British citizens will be over 65. That means fewer workers paying tax and more pensioners needing health care and social care. The old age dependency ratio is heading for levels we have never seen before. The state pension is already the biggest single item in the welfare budget, and it's about to get a lot bigger. Meanwhile, the working age population is barely growing at all. We are turning into one giant retirement home with a shrinking workforce expected to fund it. Start with the big lie we've all been sold, that Britain is still a serious country. It's not. It's a nostalgia theme park with a seat at the G7, because no one's had the heart to ask for the badge back. The numbers don't lie. Since 2008, UK productivity has flatlined harder than a heart attack victim on a cold slab. France, Germany, even the US, they all bounced back. Britain? We just shrugged, made another cup of tea, and pretended the empire was coming back any day now. And the worst part? The people running the show know exactly what's wrong. They just don't care, because fixing it would mean upsetting the one group that actually votes, the Grey Army. Let's talk about housing, the greatest legalized robbery in British history. There are more than enough homes in this country for everyone to have one. There really are. The problem isn't supply. It's that a huge chunk of them are owned by people who already have 3, 4, 5 properties, and they've weaponized the planning system to keep it that way. The Green Belt? Less than 10% prime farmland. Most of it is scrubland you wouldn't let your dog shit on. But touch it, and the village militia comes out with pitchforks and letters to the Daily Telegraph. Result? A 35-year-old earning £50,000 in Manchester can buy a one-bed flat within 90 minutes of his job. Then there's the pensioner protection racket. The famous triple lock. Cute name for a brutal policy. Every year, the state pension goes up by the best of inflation, wages, or 2.5%. Even if the country is burning, 2022, inflation 11%. Pensioners got a 10% plus rise. Working age benefits, frozen, wages, crushed. We now live in the only developed country where pensioners are richer, on average, than people in work. Let that sink in. We have inverted the natural order. We take money from nurses who can't afford to live near the hospital and hand it to retired colonels in Dorset who already own half the village. And when someone whispers, maybe we should means test the winter fuel payment, the entire political class runs for cover like vampires from garlic. Healthcare, same story. The NHS is becoming the National Geriatric Service. Perfectly lovely, but it's eating the budget alive because we have more 85-year-olds than teenagers. Someone has to pay for that. Guess who? You. National insurance up. Income tax threshold frozen. Council tax through the roof. The tax burden is the highest since Clement Attlee was wearing short trousers. Also, Karen from Kent can have her hip replacement on the taxpayer while her £2 million house sits exempt from capital gains. Now zoom out. Take a train, any train, north of Watford Gap. Actually don't. You'll be late, wet, and furious. London just got a £19 billion cross-city line that looks like it was designed by Apple. The North was promised HS2, a proper high-speed link that might finally stop people treating Manchester like an S on the edge of the civilized world. Then they cancelled the bit that mattered. Classic Britain. Spend £20 billion digging a tunnel under London. Then shrug and say, sorry, no money left when it comes to connecting actual cities that make things. The north of England now has worse infrastructure than Poland. Poland, the country we used to feel sorry for. And the punchline? Brexit. We were told taking back control would make us richer. Instead, we built a wall of paperwork around the country. Trade with our closest neighbors, down 15 to 20%. Food prices up, lorry queues, empty shelves. But hey, blue passports, right? Worth it. The result of all this, the British dream, is dead. Your parents' generation could leave school at 16, walk into a factory, buy a house by 25, retire at 60 with a final salary pension. You need a master's degree to earn £32,000, pay half of it in rent to someone's dad, and the state pension age is heading for 70 because there's no money left after triple lock granny got her 10% bump. The kids have clocked it. That's why they're leaving. Doctors to Australia, engineers to Canada, scientists to Germany, Anyone with options is gone. The ones who stay either inherit or emigrate. The rest just cope. Side hustles, OnlyFans, living with parents at 35, whatever it takes. Can this be fixed? Yes, but not without blood on the carpet. Rip up the 1947 Town and Country Planning Act and build houses. Lots of them, high ones. On the bits of green belt that aren't actually green. Tax wealth properly, land value tax. Close the non-dom loophole, make property speculation hurt. Stop canceling every infrastructure project the moment costs go up. Finish things. Accept that the EU is our home market, whether we like it or not, and stop cutting off our nose to spite Brussels. Tell the boomers the party's over, means test the pensioner perks. Make the winter fuel payment taxable. Sorry, but the money's gone. Will any of this happen? Of course not. Because the people who own the houses, who vote in every election, who write furious letters when anyone suggests change, they're doing just fine. They've pulled the ladder up, poured concrete in the rungs, and set fire to the instructions. So here we are, a rich country full of poor young people. A global city surrounded by a museum. A nation that won the war and lost the peace so hard it's still paying the bill 80 years later. The empire is a corpse. Time to stop polishing the coffin and start building something new. Or we can keep pretending it is still 1953 and wonder why the kids don't want to stick around for the wake. Your call, Britain. But the clock's ticking. And the bill just landed on your table.